my daughter are here too. I don't know where they went. I think she took her out because she was sleeping. So we'll get a chance to meet afterwards. I was born and raised in Ecuador, and then I came to the States when I was in high school, 16, and then I've been here ever since, and in OC, and I've been pastoring for about 12 years now, and I graduated from Talbot School of Theology at Biola University, just to introduce myself to you guys, so you can know a little bit about myself. Thank you for worship. We came a little early, and my family and were listening to them practice. They're so talented and gifted, and I really mean that. I was really blessed, and so was my wife. So thank you very much. Today, I wanted to speak on a topic that because I've never met you guys, and I didn't know who to expect and the age group and things like that. So I wanted to speak on a topic that I think everybody can relate to, regardless of your age or where you're at in life, and that's the topic of suffering, extreme suffering. Everybody at some point in life has to go through a season of extreme suffering. It doesn't matter whether you're young or old. If you live in this life, if you live on this earth, we have to face seasons like that because we live in a broken world and because we live in a sinful world. Nobody's immune to it. Everybody will face it at one point or another. And I know that younger people also have seasons like that. Just because you're young, I know it doesn't mean that you don't go through moments like that. I remember when I was starting in ministry, I was doing youth ministry. And normally would have Bible studies Friday nights, and normally they would never open up about their lives or anything like that during sharing time. But one particular night, one of the sisters started to open up about her life. She was only in 7th grade. And I remember she was sharing with us how that week she almost killed herself. She literally almost killed herself because she was having problems at home, and it had something to do with her mom. She was divorced, so she would bring different men to the house, and that really started to affect her in a negative way, and it got to a point where she couldn't take it anymore. And one night when there was nobody at home, she went out to the kitchen, she grabbed a knife, and she literally was going to cut herself and kill herself. But just when she was about to do that, that's when her mom walked in to the house, and their eyes met, and then she dropped the knife, and she was crying and ran back into her room. So I know that even at such a young age, you can go through seasons of extreme suffering that maybe nobody knows about. And today I wanted to call those seasons of suffering, "How long, O Lord" moments. King David had a season like that. Even though God blessed him in so many ways, and he had his Goliath days, he also had a season where it was so difficult, so hard for him, that he thought he literally was going to die. And he called these moments "How long, O Lord" moments. And I think we all have those moments in life, right? For some of us is, "How long, O Lord, until I can get a boyfriend or I can get a girlfriend? How long, O Lord, before I can finally find a real job, a career where I will no longer have to worry about money ever again, or late payments, or checks bouncing, or whatever the case may be." For some of us, it's, "How long, O Lord, before my child really starts to walk with you, really starts to turn back towards you, and lives as a Christian?" For some of us, it's my parents, right? "How long, O Lord, before my parents can finally start to get along, and we can finally start to have a family that really feels like a family?" Right? Many of us, go through so many different, "How long, O Lord" moments, and David had his, and today he shares with us how he overcame his "How long, O Lord" moments, how he overcame seasons of extreme suffering. So we want to see how he overcame, so that if you are going through a season like that, or if it were to come in the future, you would also know how to overcome them as well. So if you have your Bibles, please open up with me to the book of Psalm chapter 13. the Psalm chapter 13. In Psalm chapter 13, this is what it says. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest my enemies say, I have prevailed over him. Lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken. But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. King David had 4 how long, O Lord moments in his life. The first 2 are spiritual how long, O Lord moments. He was struggling spiritually. Right? He says, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? King David, who was so used to having God's presence so powerfully felt in his life, King David, who enjoyed such rich fellowship with God, this is a time in his life where he completely feels ignored by God, abandoned by God, the same God that was with him when he was fighting Goliath and he was strengthening to do so. This time, God is nowhere to be found. He feels as if God is completely ignoring all of his prayers, all of his requests, and as if God has completely abandoned him in a time when he needs God the most. He needs God to come through, but God is silent. God is absent. God seems to be ignoring him and seems to have abandoned King David completely in his life. You know, for those of us who are maybe more mature in our faith, who've been Christians for a longer time, we know that in life, there is nothing harder than to feel as if God is not there anymore. Right? There's nothing harder than God's presence all of a sudden feeling like it's completely gone. I don't know if you guys have experienced that or not, but for those of us who are used to enjoying and start to realize that there's nothing better in life than God, and are used to enjoying rich fellowship with him in the mornings throughout the day, and we depend on him for everything, the hardest thing that we can experience is God all of a sudden feeling as if he's completely gone. Right? It's as if, my daughter is 2 years old. She's always calling for her mom. She goes, Amma, Amma, and the moment she says that, my wife comes running over and she's there. But it's as if, one day my daughter said, Amma, Amma, and my wife never responded again, and she never came to her ever again. It would be devastating for my daughter if that day ever came. It is difficult for us to lose relationships in life. It's difficult when you lose a friend, right? Somebody moves or you lose a friend. That's difficult, but you can get over something like that, right? You eventually can make more friends. It gets more difficult if you lose a sibling, a mother or a father or a child. If you lose somebody that's closer to you like that, and you feel like they're gone, they'll never come back, that hurts more, right? It's more painful because the relationship goes deeper. But when you feel as if God is not there anymore, that becomes unbearable for the Christian. So the more meaningful the relationship, the harder it is when you feel like that other person is no longer part of the relationship. And that's why King David was, struggling spiritually. He was having a difficult time because God was no longer there. He felt like God was ignoring him, and God had completely abandoned him. There was a time in my life when I was in seminary. I went to seminary because I wanted to be a pastor and I wanted to do, God's work and things like that. But when I went to seminary, my second year, I went through a season where all of a sudden, God just felt as if God was not there. And it went to the point where for the first time in my life, this is what I'm in seminary studying to become a pastor, I started to doubt Christianity. I started to doubt God. I started to doubt the existence of God. I started to question everything. Why Christianity? What about the other religions? And it's impossible for me to explain, but it was one of the most, if not the most difficult time that I've experienced in my life. Literally, that was the first time that I thought it'd be better to die than to stay alive. I didn't know how to, deal with that, so I went to a spiritual expert, because I was at Biola University, so they have a lot of resources. Might as well take advantage of them, because they charge a lot of money for tuition anyways. So I went there, and the spiritual expert or whatnot, he's somebody who deals with people that are demon possessed and stuff like that. I wasn't demon possessed. Christians can get demon possessed, but I just wanted to know what's going on with me, what's wrong with me, and then because if I didn't get answers soon, I would have to, I didn't even know whether I can continue ministry, because how can I continue to preach and teach when I no longer believe as I used to, and I'm questioning, and when I'm questioning all these things, and when I feel like God is not there anymore, and stuff like that. And then that spiritual expert, he told me, I think you're going through what, some Christians, not everybody goes through, but some Christians go through. He said, I think you're experiencing the dark night of the soul. It just sounded so cool. That did it for me. That fixed everything. All right, that sounds great. I must be more special than other Christians. I'm good with that. And he basically said, is sometimes God puts you through a season where He feels like He completely left you. He leaves you kind of on your own to help you grow and really mature. And then, but eventually, if you can hang in there and get through those seasons, then you come out stronger afterwards, something like that. Okay, that sounds kind of special, so I'll hang in there. And I think he was right. After many years, I can say that experience really led me to have a more stronger faith, a stronger foundation in my walk with God. It wasn't only emotional. It wasn't only just superficial or anything like that. But it really helped me go deeper in my relationship with God. So today, I don't doubt the presence. Even if I don't feel Him or anything like that, I know He's there. I don't doubt, and I know that He's God and everything else now. But sometimes we experience seasons in life where it feels like God abandons us in different ways. Right? Like King David, when we really, really need God, and God is the only one that can do something about our situation, and God is the only one that can help, and we pray and we cry out and we seek Him like crazy, but He doesn't answer, He doesn't respond, and no problems get solved, and life is chaotic, life is crazy. God is the only one that can help, but He's not doing anything. Right? We experience sometimes seasons like that as Christians. God is ignoring us, He's abandoned us when we need Him the most. And that's kind of what King David, is experiencing right now. And that's why he's crying out to God and saying, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? Will you hide your face from me? And because he's struggling with the presence of God, because he's struggling with God, I need you, but you're not answering. God, you're ignoring me. You're abandoning me. All of God being gone leads him to more suffering. Leads him not only to spiritual suffering, but now leads him to emotional suffering. He says, how long must I counsel my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? Right? His situation is so hard. God is nowhere to be found. Emotionally, he's just collapsing. He's just saying, I have to counsel my soul every day. He's struggling emotionally and mentally. He says, I have to counsel my soul. I have sorrow in my heart all the day. This is so difficult. And we probably all agree that the real pain in life many times is not physical pain. Physical pain, it heals. You break a bone, it heals. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal, but not really. Real pain is emotional pain. Real pain is mental pain, right? What wakes you up at night? When you remember of that one person you want to kill, right? What keeps you from sleeping when you're so bitter at someone? What eats you up alive inside? It's when you're struggling mentally and emotionally. Those are a lot more difficult to deal with, and you can't do anything about them. They're a lot more painful than physical pain. And that's what David is going through. Right? His spiritual, suffering, his mental, emotional, and he has to counsel his heart daily. He has to, I don't know if you've been in difficult situations. I have been in situations where I literally thought, was that, I wasn't going to make it anymore. And when you're in situations like that, you have to counsel your soul every day. You have to fight worry. You have to fight anxiety. You have to fight, negative and false thoughts that come into your mind. You have to tell yourself that you're not done. God is not done with you. God still has a plan for you. God will come through. This is not the end. Don't give up. You have to, because you get attacked, like in so many different ways. So you have to counsel your soul you have to fight anxiety, fear, worry, when life gets that difficult. And that's, what King David is going through. He's going through spiritual, suffering. God is ignoring him, abandoned him, or at least it feels that way. And that's leading him to, having to fight emotional, mental, struggles. Just trying to hold on to his life, that it's not over, that there will be a way out, when it doesn't seem like there will be, because even God seems to be gone. And not only that, but all of that leads him to external suffering too. King David, who never lost a battle, who can beat anybody, who can beat a giant with just a little stone, he says, how long shall my enemy be exalted over me? This time there's an enemy that seems to be exalted over an enemy that seems to be stronger than King David. He was never scared of even bears or lions or giants, but for the first time maybe, he says there's an enemy that I just don't think I can overcome. There's an external suffering, someone outside that seems more stronger than him, and if God doesn't come through, that enemy will have his way and will have victory over King David. This just shows you that one thing leads to another. When things are not right with God, it leads to emotional, mental breakdown. And when we're having emotional, mental breakdown, it usually kind of shows on the outside, right? For me, when I really, really get stressed, my eyes get swollen. I don't know what it is. Doctors don't know what it is. But it's just so annoying, because everybody asks me, what's wrong with your eyes, what's wrong with you? And then, it takes weeks for, things to get better and stuff. But whenever there's something happening inside, it manifests outside, okay? In some way, or so is one thing is everything is connected to one another, right? And that's kind of what's happening with David. And we know that this is a very difficult time in his life, because he's saying, God, if you don't come through, if you don't answer, if you don't help me right now, my eyes are closing slowly, and if once they close completely, I will sleep the sleep of death, meaning I will not wake up again. He thought he was going to die. He thought his situation was so difficult, impossible to overcome, that if once he closed his eyes, he wasn't going to wake up again. His situation was hopeless, and he thought he was going to die. And then, just when everything seemed so hopeless, everything changed for King David when he realized one thing. His situation didn't change. He was still in pain and suffering. But instead of his eyes closing, his eyes started to slowly open up. Hope started to rise again. He started to sing songs of victory that had not yet happened yet. Like, his situation didn't have a resolution yet, but he started to sing salvation and rescue and sing songs of joy, knowing that a deliverance would come.
Amen.
Everything happened for King David when he realized one thing. It was an internal change. Nothing changed outside. It was an internal change. Everything changed for King David when he realized God's steadfast love for him. Everything changed for him and brought him back to his feet, gave him energy again, helped him rise again to do battle, to do what he needed to do, when he remembered God's steadfast love for him. Now, this is a lot more important than what you can imagine, because I think this is what King David means. I think what King David means, I think what he's saying is that, you know, when he looks at his life, at the history of his life, when he looks at his life to that point, to that day, the only thing that he can remember is God's steadfast love for him. Steadfast means never changing. It will never change. That stays constant for the Christian. God loved you in the past, God will love you now, and God will love you forever and ever. That cannot change. So when King David thinks of his life, of his past, he must have had other how long, O Lords, in his past. He must have had suffering, excruciating suffering, impossible, hopeless situations in the past. But he doesn't remember any of that. The only thing he remembers is how God loved him in the past. Do you know what that means? That means that every how long, O Lord moment, every extreme suffering is nothing more than a love story in the making between you and God. The how long will not remain. What will remain is God's love. How God loved you in your suffering. How God delivered you in your suffering. How God made miracles in your suffering. That's the only thing that you will remember in your life. You will not remember how your situation will never remain as a how long, O Lord. It will always turn into a love story. How God loved me through that and how He made it into a love story. This is why the only thing he remembers is God's love. From the day he was born to that day, he had so much pain and suffering. But the only thing he remembers is how much God loved him. How long, O Lord, was nothing more than a love story in the making of how God loved David throughout his life. And when he realized that, this is why he can sing songs of joy. This is why he can claim victory before it comes, because this is what he realized. His how long, O Lord moment right now is turning into a love story. It's turning into a love story. So when he knows that his how long, O Lord moment is turning into a love story, he can sing, he can praise God before anything changes, because he knows what it's becoming. He knows what his suffering is becoming. It's becoming a love story. And when you know that your situation will not end up as a how long, O Lord, but as a Christian, it will end up as a love story, then you get excited. Then even if when nothing changes, you can start singing and you can start hoping for what's going to happen, because you know it's going to turn into a love story of how God never left you, how God delivered you, how God was with you, how God helped you, how God turned things into a miracle in ways that you could have never expected or imagined, how it was not the end, but it was just the process of how God was making a love story with the story of your life. Well, when you start to realize that, then every how long, O Lord, every suffering can become a song of joy, can become a victory you claim before it even happens, because you know where God is taking your story. I was doing a little bit of reflecting on my life to see whether this was true or not in my life. I wanted to see if God turned my how long, O Lords, in the past into love stories. So I was reflecting a little bit on my life. But before I go there, let me just say one thing. This doesn't mean that you will not suffer as a Christian. As a Christian, you will suffer. Now, why we suffer, we don't know. Nobody can give us an explanation why we suffer. Sometimes it's because, of our sins. Sometimes it's because, God just brings it upon our life to help us grow. Sometimes it's because God knows that we need that suffering at that point in our lives. We don't know, and we would never ask for suffering, but God knows we need it to help us grow in some way, shape, or form. So He brings it. He knows. He's wise. He knows what He's doing. So sometimes He brings it. Sometimes He brings small suffering in our lives to keep us from bigger sufferings in the future. So He brings suffering. Suffering will come, and we don't know the reason why, but we can be certain of one thing. We don't know why we suffer, but we know that God loves us. Okay, we don't know why we suffer, but we know that God loves. That's one thing we can know for sure. We know that He loves us. How can we know that He loves us? We can know that He loves us because He proved it to you and to me. He died for you and for me. When somebody is willing to die for you, that's evidence that they really, really love you. Has anybody ever died for you? They don't love you that much. I'm just kidding. When somebody can die for you, when somebody dies for you, they're showing you that they really love you. Jesus showed that on the cross by dying for you. So we know that, one thing we know for sure is that He loves us, right? He proved it on that cross. And if God can do, something as hard as dying for you, taking care of your life and mind, it's the easy part. Right? Dying is the hard part. Taking care of your life and mind here on earth for 80, 90 years, that's easy for God. He already did the hard part. So if He's willing to die for you, He will take care of you and me. So we know, at least we know that, He loves us and He will take care of us. And we know that, we know that, let's just say the worst were to happen to you and to me, right? Where, somehow, some way we were about to die on this earth. That's the worst that can happen, right? In our minds, that, somehow, some way, we're going to die. We're about to die. But even if the worst were to happen, even if death were to come our way, that still ends in a love story for the Christian, right? Because if we're going to die, that means if we die, there's no more problems. There's no more how long, O Lord. And we instantly go to be in the presence of Jesus, right? So, even death, even if the worst were to happen, it still ends in a love story. And the best love story, right? Finally, all the problems and the sufferings of this life, finally they're gone. They stopped. And finally, we're in paradise with Christ and enjoying His presence and fellowshipping with Him. So even if death were to come, it still ends on a love story for the Christian. But in this life, do our How Long, O Lords turn into love stories? Yes, they do. But I wanted to share some of as I was reflecting on my life, how God really made every How Long, O Lord that I can remember into a love story. And it starts when I was a baby. When I was a baby, I was born and raised in Ecuador, like Deacon An, I think, mentioned. And when I was a baby, I had a nanny. I had an Ecuadorian nanny, right? And my parents were working hard. They were, trying to become rich, like every other Korean parent, right, when they were younger. And then, so they were like working so hard. My mom had a restaurant, and my dad was doing some other kind of business. And my nanny, one day, without telling my mom, without telling anybody, she just took me out of the house, right? When nobody was there, she took me out of the house, and she didn't, she took me out of the house, and I was out for hours, and my mom found out, and she dropped everything, and she went out there and was trying to look for me all over Ecuador, to see whether she can find me or not. Because this is why. In a country like Ecuador, if they take a foreigner like me, it only usually means one thing: they kidnap me, because they want money, in return. So my parents knew that, and that just is very common there. So they were just so freaked out, and like, where's my son? And they thought I got kidnapped, and that's my first How Long, O Lord moment, when I didn't even know it was a How Long, O Lord, right? How Long, O Lord moment. And for some reason, my nanny, she brought me back that night, maybe 8-9 hours later. She brought me back home. I don't know if she maybe decided not to kidnap me or not in between, but she brought me back, and she told my mom that she took me to her brother's house, and they were just spending time there, and then she brought me back. So my first How Long, O Lord turned into a love story. I got reunited with my family, my parents, and I can stand before you today. If I got kidnapped back then, my life story would be very, very different today. But that How Long, O Lord moment turned into a love story. And then my dad actually got kidnapped in Ecuador, so he wasn't as lucky as me. He was still in Ecuador, and he bought a new car. Now, if you're foreigner and new car, bad combination, in a country like Ecuador. But he bought a new car. He finally made it financially. All that hard work paid off. And he went to his friend's house, and he came out at night, and he was gonna come back home. But right before he started his car,